The steam from the espresso machine hissed like a dying confession as I watched Senator Alex Harrington slip the diamond onto her finger, right there in the marble-floored atrium of the Capitol, surrounded by flashing cameras and sycophantic smiles. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice smooth as aged bourbon. But his eyes darted to the shadows where I stood frozen, mug in hand, the coffee I'd brewed for him that morning now spilling over my trembling fingers onto the polished stone. In that instant, the world cracked open, and all the stolen nights, the whispered promises in hotel suites overlooking the Potomac, poured out like black ink staining my soul, because I'd loved him fiercely, foolishly, for 3 years. And he was choosing her, the poised campaign strategist with the perfect pedigree, over the barista who knew the exact grind for his double-shot Americano. I didn't scream. I didn't shatter the illusion for the press corps milling like vultures. Instead, I turned and walked away, the scalding liquid burning my skin a dull reminder that some wounds you carry in silence, especially when the man who owns your heart is the golden boy of the Senate, heir to a legacy of straight-laced power that could bury scandals deeper than Arlington's graves. Washington, D.C., in the fall of 2025, felt like a city built on secrets, grand marble facades hiding the rot of compromises, the Potomac murmuring under bridges where lobbyists brokered deals that could topple empires or birth them anew. I'd come here 5 years ago, fresh out of a community college in Ohio with a barista certification and dreams bigger than my bank account, chasing the myth of reinvention that America peddles like apple pie. Cody Ellis. That's me, 5 feet 10 inches of Midwestern earnestness wrapped in faded band tees and jeans that had seen better days. I landed a gig at the Daily Grind, a hole-in-the-wall coffee shop tucked into the shadow of the Russell Senate office building, where the air always smelled of overbrewed ambition and underpaid hope. It started innocently enough, as these things do in a town where everyone's playing a long con. Senator Alexander Alex Harrington breezed in one drizzly Tuesday morning, his Burberry trench coat slung over one arm, phone glued to his ear as he barked orders about a filibuster on climate reparations. He was 35, broad-shouldered with that effortless wasp charm, blonde hair cropped just messy enough to look approachable, blue eyes that could disarm a room or devastate a soul. Heir to old Virginia money, Yale law, married once briefly to a socialite who'd bailed after his coming-out whispers leaked to the tabloids. Officially, he was reforming his image, straight, single, focused on the people. Unofficially, that's where I came in. Double Americano. No foam, make it quick. Flashing a smile that hit me like a shot of adrenaline. I nodded, hands steady on the grinder, but my pulse betrayed me. By week 2, he was in every morning at 6:45 sharp, lingering at the counter while I frothed milk for the suits behind him. We'd talk, nothing deep, just the weather, the Mets' latest collapse, how D.C. traffic was a metaphor for Congress. He tipped like he was buying my silence, 20s folded crisp, and one day, as rain sheeted the windows, he asked about my tattoo, a small rainbow infinity loop on my wrist, inked in a fit of post-breakup defiance back in Cleveland. Symbol of endless possibility, I quipped, sliding his cup across the scarred oak counter. He traced it with his thumb, a feather-light touch that lingered a beat too long, sending sparks up my arm. Or just a reminder that loops can trap you, he murmured, eyes locking on mine with an intensity that made the fluorescent hum fade to nothing. That was the hook. From there, The mornings blurred into something electric, charged with the unspoken. By month 3, the coffee runs evolved. He'd text, burner phone. Always, summoning me to his Georgetown row house under the guise of catering a late strategy session. I'd arrive with a thermos of his perfect brew, heart hammering like I'd smuggled state secrets instead of grounds from Ethiopia. The first time he kissed me, it was in the kitchen, flour dusted from some half-assed attempt at pancakes, his hands framing my face as if I were fragile china. "Cody," he breathed, like my name was a prayer. "You're the only real thing in this circus." We tumbled into it then, nights tangled in Egyptian cotton sheets, his body mapping mine with the reverence of a man starved for authenticity. He'd talk politics in the afterglow, vulnerabilities spilling out, the pressure from donors to settle down, the fear of torpedoing his shot at the governorship. I'd listen, trace the scar on his rib from a fraternity hazing gone wrong, and whisper that he deserved more than the closet's cage. But love in D.C. is a high-wire act without a net. Alex was magnetic, a force that pulled you into orbit, but gravity here crushes dreamers. I ignored the red flags, the way he'd check his surroundings before pulling me close in the shadowed alleys of DuPont Circle, the curt texts canceling meets when a pole dipped. "It's the game, babe," he'd say, nuzzling my neck in the dim light of his study, surrounded by leather-bound tomes on constitutional law. "But you're my escape." I believed him because I had to, because in a city of transients, he'd made me feel seen, chosen. We'd steal weekends in Rehoboth Beach, driving down the coast in his unmarked SUV, windows down, Springsteen blasting as the Atlantic crashed like applause. Away from the hill's glare, he dropped the senator facade. "Just Alex," laughing as I buried him in sandcastles shaped like the Capitol dome, our fingers interlaced under the boardwalk stars. Yet doubt crept in like fog off the Anacostia. I'd catch him staring at his phone during our lazy Sundays, scrolling through profiles of eligible bachelorettes curated by his campaign manager, Elena Vasquez, a shark in stilettos with a Rolodex of power couples. PR bullshit, he'd dismiss, pulling me back to bed. But I saw the strain in his eyes, the way he'd flinch at mentions of family values in his stump speeches. I was his secret, the caffeine-fueled affair that kept him sharp for the fights that mattered, pushing for marriage equality riders in defense bills, quietly funding LGBTQ+ shelters in Anacostia. He called me his moral compass, but compasses spin wild in magnetic storms. One crisp October evening, as leaves turned the mall into a postcard of false permanence, he invited me to a fundraiser at the Hay Adams, in a borrowed blazer that smelled faintly of mothballs. "Just blend in," he texted, "and meet me on the balcony at 10. Nursing a ginger ale amid whispers of endorsements and emoluments, feeling like an extra in a Scorsese flick. When he appeared, tie loosened, cheeks flushed from schmoozing, he pulled me into the alcove shadows. "Missed you," he growled, lips crashing into mine with a hunger that bruised. We didn't notice the footsteps until Elena's voice sliced the air. "Alex? We need you for the toast." He sprang back like I'd electrocuted him, straightening his cufflinks with mechanical precision. I melted into the velvet curtains, heart pounding, as he flashed her that megawatt grin. "Coming. Ill." Just clearing my head. She eyed the balcony door, suspicion flickering, but he was already gone, leaving me with the echo of his cologne and a gnawing void. That night, Back in my studio apartment above a falafel joint on U Street, I stared at the ceiling cracks mapping like veins, wondering how long a man could straddle two worlds before one collapsed. The holidays amplified it all, the forced cheer of Deck the Halls galas masking the isolation of queer kids like me, far from family who still prayed I'd grow out of it. Alex sent gifts, a first edition Whitman tucked into a monogrammed leather case, engraved with, "For the poet who bruised my soul." I reciprocated with a playlist of indie folk tracks, scribbled liner notes about resilience. But December brought frost to our fire. He canceled 3 meets in a row, citing budget hearings, and when we finally collided in a no-tell motel off Wisconsin Avenue, his lovemaking felt frantic, edged with desperation. "They're pushing me toward this merger," he confessed later, cigarette smoke curling from the cracked window, a habit he only indulged with me. "Elena wants me paired with Victoria Langford. Ticarus? Progressive creds? Photogenic as hell. It'd lock in Silicon Valley donors for the 28 run." I propped on an elbow, tracing his collarbone. "And you? What do you want?" "Alex." He stared at the water-stained ceiling. Silence so long I thought he drifted off. "You," he finally whispered, turning to cup my face. "But God, Cody, this city's a meat grinder. One wrong move, and I'm yesterday's news." We made love again then, slow and sacred, as if sealing a pact against the wolves. But pacts in D.C. are written in sand. January thawed the literal ice but not the chill between us. Mornings at the daily grind resumed their rhythm, me grinding beans with ritual precision, him sweeping in with that disarming smile, our fingers brushing in the handoff like Morse code for soon. Patrons noticed the ease, the inside jokes about decaf disasters, but no one clocked the undercurrent, the way his gaze lingered on my lips, promising the pent-up storm. Behind the counter, I was his anchor, in stolen moments, his lover. It sustained me through the grind of double shifts and the loneliness of scrolling grinder profiles that paled next to his touch. Then came the Whisper campaign. The barista buddy, Jamal, overheard Elena on a call in the shop's back booth. "Victoria's on board, ring by spring, wedding by fall. Keeps the base happy, queers the optics just enough without alienating the donors." I laughed it off as gossip, but it lodged like a splinter. When I confronted Alex that night in his row house kitchen, steam rising from the pot of rigatoni I'd thrown together, he deflected with a kiss. "Rumors? Good." Elena's all bluster, but his eyes evaded mine, and for the first time, I tasted the lie, bitter as over-extracted espresso. February's Valentine hypocrisy hit like a gut punch. Deceit draped itself in red hearts and overpriced chocolates, while I nursed a solitary pint at a dive bar in Adams Morgan, toasting to endless possibilities with a bitter IPA. Alex had begged off our planned escape to the Shenandoah emergency vote on the debt ceiling, but a late-night news alert showed him at a black tie gala, arm looped through Victoria Langford's, her laugh tinkling like crystal as they posed for the society pages. She was everything the machine demanded, 32. Stanford MBA? Heir to a renewable energy fortune? With auburn waves and a smile that screamed, "Future First Lady." I scrolled the photos until my thumb ached, zooming in on his hand at the small of her back, wondering if it rested there with the same tenderness he'd once traced my spine. The next morning, he showed up at the shop unannounced, 15 minutes early, dark circles under his eyes like bruised plums. "Cody, Wait, he said as I turned to flee to the stockroom. His voice raw. I froze, apron strings biting into my hips. The shop was empty, save for the hum of the cooler and the distant clatter of Chinatown waking. It's not what it looks like. Photo op. Damage control after that ethics probe leak. I wanted to believe him, the plea in his posture, the way his fingers twitched to reach for mine. Instead, I shoved a to-go cup across the counter. Lite skew. Your coffee, Senator. But no foam. Enjoy the show. He didn't leave. Instead, he vaulted the counter, first time ever, his polished loafers scuffing the linoleum, and pulled me into the alcove behind the pastry case. I'm drowning here, he admitted, forehead pressed to mine, breath mingling with the scent of vanilla syrup. The party's elders are circling. They know about whispers from a staffer who saw us at that motel. If it breaks, it's not just my career, it's the bills I've championed. The kids in foster care who need allies. His hands shook as they cupped my jaw, thumbs brushing my stubble. Victoria's a shield. A marriage of convenience. It buys time, keeps the wolves at bay until I can pivot to something real. The word hung between us, heavy as the snowplow rumbling outside. And what about me? I whispered, voice cracking like thin ice. Your shield? Your escape? He kissed me then, deep and devouring, tasting of regret and resolve. You're my everything, he murmured against my lips. This buys us time. May her stabilize. We figure it out. Divorce after the midterms. I promise. Promises in politics are currency cheaper than campaign swag. But in that moment, with his heart hammering against mine, I clutched it like a lifeline. We made plans in hushed tones, coded texts via an app disguised as a weather tracker, meets in anonymous Airbnbs on the Virginia side. It felt like rebellion, like love clawing back from the brink. Spring unfurled in cherry blossoms and backroom deals. The city a pink haze of fragile beauty. Alex threw himself into the charade, dinners at Le Diplomate with Victoria, where paparazzi snapped shots of them sharing creme brulee. Her hand on his knee like a proprietary stamp. I'd see the headlines on my commute, Harrington's heirloom romance, Senator Court's green tech princess. Each one twisted the knife. But I'd remind myself of our pact. Of the late-night voicemails he'd leave, thinking of your laugh in Rehoboth. Hang on. Poet. This is temporary. Our stolen hours became sacraments. One April weekend, we drove to Harper's Ferry, where John Brown once rallied against chains, and history felt like a mirror to our own quiet uprising. We hiked the topa, hands brushing in the dappled light, and at a secluded overlook, he dropped to one knee, not with a ring, but with a wildflower crown he'd woven from trillium. For my king, he said, voice thick, placing it on my head with mock ceremony. We laughed until tears came, then made love on a blanket amid the bluebells. The river's rush drowning our gasps. I love you, he said afterward, fingers laced through mine, staring at the sky as if mapping constellations of escape. More than this circus deserves, but the circus doesn't yield. Elena's machine ground on, scripting their courtship with the precision of a missile strike. Victoria, to her credit, seemed oblivious or complicit in the farce, her own ambitions intertwined with his. She was sharp, principled, a vocal ally for trans rights who'd headlined at Pride. In another life, we'd have been friends, swapping stories over IPAs about navigating straight spaces. But here, she was the unwitting villain in my tragedy. Her every Instagram post, a candid of them kayaking on the Chesapeake, a fresh scar. May brought the betrayal's prelude. I was closing the shop, wiping down the espresso bar to the strains of Phoebe Bridgers crooning about motion sickness, when my phone buzzed. Not the weather app, but his personal line, the one for emergencies. Meet me. Lincoln Memorial. Steps by the reflecting pool. Heart in my throat. I bolted. Cab fare be damned. Arriving as twilight bled into the monument's white glow. He was there, pacing like a caged panther. Tie yanked loose, shirt untucked. Cody, he started, then faltered, pulling a velvet box from his pocket. Not for me. Never for me. It's happening. Tonight. The proposal. Public. Scripted. Fireworks over the tidal basin. String quartet. The works. His voice broke on the last word, and he sank onto the cold marble, head in hands. I knelt before him, the reflecting pool mirroring our fractured silhouettes. And for a moment, it was just us, two men defying the gods of empire. Why tell me, Beth? Though I knew. Because love demands witnesses, even to its funerals. I couldn't do it without you knowing first. Its optics? Cody. Fear. Tops. Then annulment. We'll go public, me. Out and proud. With you by my side. Think of the platform. I could change everything. His eyes pleaded. Blue as the first responders who'd pulled him from that frat house wreck. Now begging for absolution. I wanted to rage. To shove him into the pool and watch the ripples swallow his lies. Instead, I kissed him, fierce, forgiving, farewell. Go, I said, pulling back. Be the hero they need. But remember, heroes bleed too. He left in a town car that swallowed him whole, taillights fading like dying stars. I sat there until midnight, the monument's shadow lengthening, until a park ranger nudged me awake with gentle concern. Rough night? Kid. I nodded, throat too tight for words, and stumbled home to my apartment, where the Whitman volume lay open to Song of Myself. I celebrate myself, and sing myself. But singing felt like screaming. The proposal aired live on every network, Alex on bended knee beneath a canopy of lanterns, Victoria's gasp engineered for prime time, the Ring a rock that could anchor the Titanic. Victoria, you've illuminated paths I never dreamed, he said, scripted sincerity dripping like honey. She accepted with tears that sparkled under the lights. And America cooed, the perfect power couple, blending old money with new green. I watched from my futon, bottle of bourbon half empty, as confetti rained and toasts rang out. No one saw the tremor in his hand, the millisecond glance off camera where I imagined he searched for me. Days blurred into a numb routine. Mornings at the shop. I'd brew his Americano out of habit, then pour it down the sink when he didn't show. Patrons chattered about the engagement, Harrington's locking it down. Good for the party, and I'd nod, smile plastered like war paint, while inside, grief gnawed like termites in drywall. Jamal noticed, slipping me extra shifts to keep my mind occupied, But nights were war zones, dreams of his touch morphing into her laughter, waking sweat-soaked and hollow. A week post-proposal, he appeared at dawn, knocking on my apartment door with the quiet urgency of contrition. I let him in, not because I forgave, but because addiction dies hard. He looked wrecked, stubble shadowing his jaw, eyes red-rimmed from sleepless strategy sessions. "It was hell," he said, collapsing onto my sagging couch. Every word tasted like ash. But the polls surged 10 points overnight. "We're unstoppable now." The pronouns sliced deeper than any scalpel. I made coffee, hands steady by force of will, and we sat at my formica table, steam curling between us like ghosts. "What's the endgame?" "Alex." Beth. Voice even. "When do I stop being the ghost in your machine?" He reached for my hand, but I pulled back. "Summer 26, he vowed. Midterms. I file for divorce. Come out in a primetime address. You and me, we hit the circuit. Advocate together. It'll be revolutionary." His passion reignited something in me. A flicker of the man who'd crowned me with wildflowers. We fell into bed then, bodies remembering what minds forgot. His whispers of, "I love you," a balm on the bruise. Below. Blinds. June sweltered with scandals, a rival senator's affair exploding across the post, reminding us both how precarious the ledge. Alex grew distant, text sparse, excuses piling like unpaid bills. "Touring districts with Vic," he'd say, and I'd swallow the jealousy, reminding myself of the prize. Victoria, meanwhile, leaned in publicly, joint op-eds on climate justice, her arm through his at ribbon cuttings. She was good for him, grounded, fierce, and in twisted moments. I envied her the legitimacy, the photos that didn't demand deletion. The fracture came in July, under a full moon that bathed the National Mall in silver betrayal. I'd surprised him at his office after hours, thermos in hand, hoping for a quick debrief turned dalliance. The door was ajar. Voices spilling out, Elena's clip deficiency, Victoria's warm timbre, Alex's low rumble. "The prenup's ironclad," Elena said. "Assets separate, but optics demand kids by 28. IVF if needed, keeps the narrative family focused." The word detonated silently in my chest. I pressed against the wall, breath shallow, as Victoria laughed softly. "I'm game if you are, Alex." "But are you sure about this? The commitment?" Silence stretched, eternal as the Lincoln's gaze across the lawn. Then his voice, steady as a filibuster, "Absolutely. You're everything I need. Equal. This is us, building something lasting." I didn't wait for more. The thermos slipped from my grip, clattering like thunder, and I fled down the echoing halls, past busts of forgotten framers who preached liberty but practiced chains. The heat wave pressed like a vice, and I vomited into a reflecting pool fountain, the water rippling with my reflection, distorted, dissolving. August in D.C. is a pressure cooker of humidity and hushed alliances, where the air clings like regret and every shadow hides a fixer. I quit the daily grind that week, no notice, just a scribbled note to the owner about personal reasons, and ghosted Alex's texts, deleting the weather app with a finality that felt like amputation. My world shrank to you streets vibrant chaos, late shifts at a queer bookstore called Lambda Pages, where dog-eared copies of Giovanni's Room became my scripture, and nights at therapy, a dive where drag queens lip-synced to Chapel Roan and patrons nursed wounds with well whiskey. Cody Ellis. Version 2.0, tougher hide. But the scar tissue itched. Word of the breakup, if you could call vanishing an act a breakup, trickled through the grapevine. Jamal texted condolences. Elena even called once. Voice laced with pity, heard you bailed. Smart move? Good. Alex is all in on the fairy tale now. Fairy tale. The irony burned. I threw myself into the bookstore grind, shelving memoirs of Stonewall survivors and recommending red, white and royal blue to wide-eyed tourists. But the hollow echoed louder each dawn. Dreams haunted me, Alex's proposal to her replaying in loops, my face morphing into Victoria's, his I love yous curdling to necessary lies. Fall foliage mocked the decay inside me, crimson maples framing campaign posters of the golden couple, their smiles airbrushed to perfection. Alex's star ascended, endorsements from Obama alums. A prime slot at the DNC gala where he and Victoria slow danced to, at last, her head on his shoulder like a coronation. I avoided the news, but DC's veins pulse with gossip. At a Lambda poetry slam, a fellow barista spilled that Alex had been asking around for me. Concerned, his concern a velvet glove over the fist of control. The confrontation brewed like a storm front. Late October, as All Hallows Eve draped the city in ironic skeletons, he cornered me outside therapy. I just finished a shift, buzzed on cheap Merlot and the high of reciting Auden to a cute grad student, when his SUV idled at the curb. Get in, he said through the tinted window, voice brooking no argument. Against every instinct screaming run, I slid into the leather seat, the scent of his cologne, sandalwood and betrayal, assaulting like tear gas. He drove in silence, jaw set like granite, until we hit Rock Creek Park, leaves crunching under tires as he pulled into a secluded overlook. What the hell? Cody, he exploded, killing the engine. Moonlight slanted through the windshield, carving his face into stark angles, beautiful, broken. You disappear? No word? I thought you were hurt. Couldn't this? I had people checking hospitals. His hands gripped the wheel white-knuckled. And for a flash, I saw the vulnerability I'd fallen for. The man beneath the suit. The left. Bitter as black coffee. Her? Try eviscerated? Alex. I heard you, outside your office. Everything I need. Congrats on the lasting something. His face crumpled, and he reached for me, but I flinched. It wasn't, he started, then stopped, deflating like a punctured tire. Context. We were talking strategy. Prenups. Heirs, it's all theater. You know that. Theater? Heat rising. 3 years of me brewing your truths while you scripted your lies. And it's theater? I was your escape hatch. Alex? Not your understudy. Words I'd bottled since the proposal flooded out. Raw and ragged, the nights alone tracing his ghost on my sheets. The way his absence carved canyons in my chest. How loving him had made me smaller. Invisible. He listened, eyes glistening, then pulled me across the console into a crushing embrace. I'm sorry, he whispered, lips brushing my temple. Good. I'm so sorry. This isn't over. It can't be. We kissed then, desperate. damning, his hands fisting my shirt as if anchoring to flotsam. The park enveloped us, cicadas chorusing our folly, and for an hour, we were timeless, lovers defying the dawn. He vowed again, divorce filings drafted in secret, a coming-out plan with glad consultants. November 26, he said, tracing my tattoo. We start fresh. A place in Provincetown. No more hiding. That treacherous bird fluttered back to life in my ribcage. But November's elections shattered the illusion. Alex's party swept the house. His profile ballooning to front-page fodder, Harrington honeymoon, power pair eyes White House. Victoria. Now his fiancée in earnest. Co-chaired transition teams. Her poise amplifying his charisma. Their engagement party, a lavish affair at the Kennedy Center, dominated society feeds. With toasts to unbreakable bonds. I declined the anonymous invite slipped under my door, Elena's doing. No doubt. Opting instead for a solo vigil at the AIDS Memorial. Lighting a candle for love's lost to silence. The high tide of our reunion crashed in December. Amid twinkling lights and forced merriment. He smuggled me into his row house during a solo retreat, Victoria conveniently in Boston for family. We cooked, me chopping garlic with vengeful force. Him opening a '98 Napa Valley Red that cost more than my rent. Overpasta la norma. He confessed the toll, migraines from the scrutiny. Nights staring at the ceiling while she slept beside him. Untouched. It's a business merger, he said. Fork midway to mouth. Affection. Yes, she's brilliant. But not love. Not like us. The word warmed like the wine. And we migrated to the study, where he read me Whitman by firelight. His voice a low timbre that vibrated through me. We made love on the bearskin rug, slow, exploratory, reclaiming territories long neglected. Afterward, curled against him, I dared the question, when do we end the act? He stroked my hair. Gaze distant. Soon. January briefing with the caucus, I'll float the divorce as irreconcilable visions. Spin it progressive, prioritizing policy over personal. January came with blizzards and betrayals anew. I woke to my phone exploding, alerts. Voicemails. Jamal's panic text. Turn on CNN now. There was. Live from the Capitol Rotunda, Alex and Victoria. Rings exchanged in a surprise elopement. Vows exchanged before a bipartisan chorus. In times of division, he intoned. Her hand in his. We choose unity. No tremor. No glance off camera. Just resolve. Etched in marble. I shattered then, a mug hurled against the wall. Shards scattering like my resolve. The pieces clicked, Elena's machine. Overriding his script, donors threatening pullouts, the siren call of legacy. He texted once, forgive the optics. Briefing tomorrow. Hold, but I blocked him. The digital equivalent of bolting the door. Grief morphed to fury, a bonfire that propelled me forward. I applied to night classes at Georgetown, creative writing, because stories heal what facts fracture, and volunteered at Casa Ruby, the trans youth shelter, channeling my ache into action. Spring 2026 bloomed with my reinvention, essays published in local rags about queer invisibility in politics, a short story chapbook self-printed on Lambda's press. Alex's marriage stabilized his ascent, committee chairmanships. Whispers of VP shortlists, but rumors swirled of cracks, her growing frustration with his late nights, his reliance on mystery advisors. I crossed paths with Victoria once, at a climate rally on the mall. She approached, tentative, extending a hand. Cody? Alex mentioned. You're talented. We'd love your input on a youth outreach piece. Her eyes held no malice. Just the weariness of a woman navigating the same maze. Polite. Appreciate it. But I'm writing my own story now. The climax crested in June, as cicadas screamed their 17-year song. An envelope arrived, no return address, containing a USB drive and a note in his scrawl, watch. Then decide. Alone in my apartment, now adorned with framed prints of Harvey Milk and Audre Lorde. I plugged it in. A video, shaky cam, time-stamped a month prior, Alex in his study, facing a mirror like a confessional. If you're seeing this, I've failed us, he began, voice cracking. The elopement was panic, Elena's ultimatum. Threats of exposure. I thought it bought time, but it's poisoned everything. I love you, Cody. Always have. If there's a way back. It cut off, his face dissolving in static. Tears blurred the screen, but resolve hardened beneath. I didn't call. Instead, I wrote the letter, sealed, left at his office via courier. Time's up. Senator. Your loops trapped us both. Break free. Or stay caged. I'm already flying. Enclosed, a single wildflower, pressed and brittle. Summer solstice brought the storm. Headlines screamed, Harrington scandal, Senator's secret affair rocks campaign. Leaked emails, mine to him, coded but damning, splashed across the post. Courtesy of a vengeful aide. Elena resigned in disgrace. Victoria filed for annulment citing deception. Her presser a masterclass in grace. Love demands honesty. Politics? Apparently. Does not. Alex went silent, retreating to Virginia estates. His future a smoldering ruin. Reporters swarmed Lambda, thrusting mics at my face. Mr. Bus. Comment on the betrayal. I faced them, heart steady as the Potomac's flow. Betrayal? Awakening. Alex Harrington taught me that power without heart is hollow. We're all human, flawed, fumbling toward light. Let's talk real change, protections for queer youth. Not photo ops. The clip went viral. My voice a ripple in the deluge. He came to me then, unannounced on a sweltering July eve. Standing on my stoop in khakis and a faded UVA tee, no suit, no shield. Cody, he said, voice hoarse. I lost it all. But I'd lose it again for one more morning with you. Rain started, sudden and sheeting, soaking us as I pulled him inside, not for absolution, but reckoning. We didn't make love that night. Instead, bewildered, until the storm broke and dawn painted the skyline in hesitant gold. He confessed it all, the AIDS blackmail, Elena's forged prenup clauses binding him tighter than vows, the gnawing shame of loving me while pledging to her. I thought I was protecting us, he said, nursing a mug of my subpar drip, no espresso machine in my humble digs. But I was just scared. Of losing the platform. The fight. Of not being enough for you without the shine. I listened. The poet in me cataloging his fractures. The boy who'd hidden crushes in boarding school diaries. The man who'd weaponized charm to survive. You're enough, I said finally. Not tenderly, but truthfully. But enough isn't licensed to lie. We rebuild? Or we don't, on honesty. No scripts. He nodded, tears carving tracks through the rain on his cheeks. And for the first time, I saw him not as the senator, but the survivor, seeking. The fallout unfolded like a Greek tragedy scripted by TMZ. Alex's resignation letter hit the wires at noon. Personal failings demand personal accountability. I've failed the trust of those I serve, and those I love. No mention of me, but the implication hung heavy. Victoria, in a move of quiet nobility, issued a joint statement. We part as allies, committed to progress over pettiness. To my queer brothers and sisters, visibility is victory. She reached out later, over coffee at a neutral teaism, not his brew, but chamomile for healing. He was lost, she said, stirring honey with deliberate calm. But you're the map he needed. Don't let this city dim you. America's reaction was a Rorschach of outrage and empathy, MAGA trolls decrying gay agenda sabotage, progressives hailing it as a closet-busting milestone. Protests erupted, not against him, but for US, rainbow flags waving outside the Russell Building. Chants of love wins, lies lose. I became accidental activist, moderating panels at human rights campaign galas. My story a cautionary hymn to the perils of conditional love. Alex retreated to a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains, penning a memoir tentatively titled Brewing Storms, A Senator's Reckoning. We communicated in letters, analog, intimate, his prose evolving from polished filibusters to vulnerable verse, echoing Whitman's democratic vistas. Fall 2026 brought tentative bridges. He returned to D.C. for a low-key fundraiser, not his, but for Casa Ruby, showing up in the back row, unassuming in flannel. Our eyes met across the crowded community center, and afterward, in the alley amid overflowing dumpsters and distant sirens, he handed me a thermos. Your Americano. Double shot. No foam. I learned etiquette, steam warming my palms, and we walked, aimless, unhurried, along the Anacostia Trail, where joggers blurred past and the river reflected our tentative peace. You're different, I noted, sipping the brew, perfect. Of course. He shrugged, hands in pockets. Humbled. Therapy twice a week. Sponsorships with Glad. Writing helps, turns the chaos to clarity. Vivid dreams. Founding a nonprofit for queer political hopefuls, mine. Expanding Lambda into a full press for marginalized voices. No grand gestures. No proposals, just possibility. Fragile as first frost. Winter solstice marked 6 months since the scandal's blaze. He invited me to the cabin, a modest A-frame with views of mist-shrouded peaks, far from marble halls. I went, backpack stuffed with books and bourbon, heart braced for whatever truth the snows unearthed. We hiked first, boots crunching virgin powder, breath clouding in companionable silence. At the overlook echoing our Harper's Ferry idyll, he stopped. Not kneeling, but offering a hand. No rins. No runs, he said. Just this, I choose you. Every morning. As we are. If you'll have me. I searched his face, lines etched deeper, but eyes clear, unguarded. Love isn't a loop. I realized, it's a spiral, ascending through scars. Every morning, I echoed, pulling him close. We kissed as flurries danced, the world vast and indifferent below. Back in the cabin, fire crackling, we shared stories, not of betrayal, but beginnings, my Ohio awkwardness at prom, dodging crushes on the quarterback, his Yale nights, stealing glances at roommates while toasting to frat loyalty, laughter mingled with tears, the bourbon loosening tongues. But bodies reacquainting without the frenzy of secrecy, it felt like homecoming, not flawless, but earned. Spring 2027 greened the mountains, and we planted roots, a co-op in Tacoma Park, where community gardens bloomed with basil and bee balm, neighbors swapping pie for plot advice. Alex guest lectured at universities, his coming out a footnote to advocacy, while I published mornings in the margins, a collection weaving our tale into broader queer tapestries, betrayal as catalyst, not curse. Victoria visited once, bearing heirloom tomatoes from her new venture in solar startups, and we three shared a meal, paella simmered slow, conversations ebbing from policy to personal, forgiveness a quiet undercurrent. Not every day shone. Triggers lingered, election cycles stirring old anxieties. My nightmares of rings and reflecting pools, but we navigated with tools, couples counseling via Zoom, date nights at indie theaters screening Moonlight reruns. He learned to grind beans. I to tolerate his NPR podcasts at dawn. Humanistic in its mess. Proved not a fairy tale but a farm, tilled daily. Yielding uneven but nourishing. By summer's end, as fireflies lit the co-op yard like errant stars, Alex proposed, not with diamonds, but a wildflower crown, renewed. Endless, but open, he said, placing it gently. Accepted, not with vows, but vision, a commitment ceremony at Rehoboth, boardwalk vows under the stars, inviting the world, Victoria as best woman, Jamal toasting with IPAs. The ceremony was simple, profound, 50 souls on the beach, waves lapping like applause, Auden read by a drag auntie in full Gloria Swanson glam. We gather not to conquer closets, Alex said in his unscripted toast, and in mine, but to honor the hearts that dared open them. Laughter rippled, tears flowed, and as we danced barefoot in the surf to Springsteen's Thunder Road, I knew we'd brewed something real from the ruins. Years folded forward. Our nonprofit thrived, mentoring out queer Pauls who ran uncloseted, unflinching. I taught writing at community colleges, my students penning manifestos that echoed our survival. Alex, graying at the temples but no less magnetic, advised from the sidelines, his memoir a bestseller that funded scholarships. Victoria married a climate scientist, their wedding a green wonder in Napa, and we attended, arms linked, toasting to reinventions. In quiet mornings, as I frothed milk for our shared ritual, his Americano, my latte with cinnamon, he'd murmur, "Thank you for the coffee, poet," tracing his loop-scarred wrist. Every day, I'd reply, not endless, but enduring. In America's grand, flawed experiment, we'd carved our verse, dramatic in fall, emotional in rise, romantic in reclaim, humanistic in the humble grind of grace. And so, under DC's watchful spires, or the mountain's misty veil, we lived, persisted. Because some stories don't end in happily ever after, they dawn anew. One perfect pour at a time.